Hi, welcome to the Investing with Index Heads podcast where we bring you a regular dose of alpha and beta and all things market. I am Anish Teli from QED Capital. Joining me today are Prashant Krishna from Portfolio Yoga and Praveen Palande, Editor Markets at ET Prime. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of QED Capital or Portfolio Yoga. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of QED Capital or Portfolio Yoga.
Hi Anish and hi Prashant. Great to have you guys out here. And I'm Praveen. Anish is a portfolio manager. Prashant has been in the industry for a longest time. So we are not getting into this introduction part right now.
Yeah.
Let us kind of I am a journalist with ET Prime. So we just are here to discuss some important happenings in the stock market. We will talk about many ideas. But first, we want to talk about this stock called ITC. It is a story that Anish had done for Economic Time ET Prime, and where he basically had only one thing to ask. Rather, he was questioning in the story was that is the price of ITC right? Okay, so Anish, would you come in between and basically come and tell us what was the idea that went through your mind when you decided to look at ITC from this particular point of view, almost is the market treating ITC in giving it a fair price?
Yeah. So thanks, Praveen. So I think what I was essentially looking at is that in spite of ITC deploying their cash all these years, has it been efficient in allocating their cash? So it was just it just started with a big picture thought that had they just everything for a day nowadays starts with the index. If you are invested in the index, would you have at least beaten that? That is the bar which the lowest bar that you start off with. So I just did one random Excel calculation and we got that figure from, I think the trigger was that Morgan Stanley report where we first time got a consolidated number of how much has ITC really invested in their FMCG business over the years. The figure came out to something like 88 or 81,000 crores. And have they created enough value for their investors? Should they have returned the money back? Should they have kept the money? So that that was the trigger point. And we just did that calculation, which I then shared with you, that had they invested in the Nifty itself. So what ITC the investors attribute to the FMCG part of the business today is around 1,10,000 crores out of the 2,40,50,000 crores that is attributed to the whole company. So 80,000 crores has just barely grown to 1,10,000 crores over a period of something like 16, 17 years. If you are invested in the index, that money would have been 2 lakh crores. And if they were really interested in the FMCG business, that same money would have grown to 5 lakh crores if they had just invested in a basket of, the stocks that make up the FMCG index. So that was that was an eye opener. That was like really shocking for me to see that. And so then I went back to our all-time guru Warren Buffett and just saying that what the first thing that a manager has to be evaluated on is his capital allocation decisions. And there I would say that ITC has been terrible in terms of capital allocation. Of course, the Morgan Stanley report goes into a lot of details in terms of what the issues have been on the tobacco side, what the issues have been on the non-tobacco side, how they are growing that. But as an ITC investor, you would probably ask, would I have been better off just taking that money and reinvesting it somewhere else? Or some other fund managers have a different view that they are perhaps buying a FMCG company for the next 10, 15 years, which is going to grow. And ITC is number one, number two in a lot of its sectors categories now. But I'll just share one personal anecdote. In this lockdown, we were not getting fresh atta. So the last 10 days, the atta suddenly changed. So I asked my wife, what is the atta that we're eating? She said, it's the best atta available. I said, which one? She said, IT Ashirwad atta hai. I said, Ashirwad atta, but it tastes bitter. Like, the rotis taste really bitter and it was a very different taste. I said, boss, and she said, this is among that quality also, this is the best quality that, that the highest premium quality of atta. I said, if this is the atta that ITC has, and in this category, it is number one. I don't know what the other categories look like. So that's just a personal anecdote I have on ITC. But yeah, Prashant, over to you, man. What do you think?
No, I mean, starting off, I think it's would be a bit unfair to compare with their investments in. I mean, first of all, I think they have been wrong in terms of capital allocation for a very long time, not just now kind of thing. I mean, it's not like suddenly they started allocating haphazardly. I mean,
Yeah.
ITC Hotels, if you remember, was a listed company way back in time kind of thing. I mean, they merged it into ITC a long time ago. So the capital allocation has been more on side of what do you say, high capex driven. I mean, you take Indian hotels, they have been having zero ROE kind of thing, despite having one of the best brands in business kind of thing. I mean, I was recently reading the autobiography of Robert Kirk, who started the Shangri-La Hotels. I mean, he should started Shangri-La Hotels much later. I mean, basically around 40 years back kind of thing. And they have around 100 plus properties kind of thing. Comparatively, neither Taj, neither ITC, I mean, they have never been able to grow. I mean, this is despite being, I mean, one needs a capex heavy industry. I mean, they have actually chosen the harder part kind of thing in terms of where to go and invest kind of thing, in terms of their whatever capex they came out kind of thing. I mean, they were claiming, if you remember, they have tried to build out a Wills brand for clothing kind of thing. I mean, the idea was, how do you get a, I mean, what do you say? I mean, if you take Kingfisher, for example, the whole brand building exercise was supposed to be done by the airline. So, I mean, that because it was it was a very different industry where, I mean, Malaya had no really domain expertise kind of thing. He bombed spectacularly. I think same for ITC, only thing that they have, I mean, hotel business is not as bad as the airline business. So ITC has made a lot of blunders in that sense. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, because they have been, one of the very few companies where you can not only have the larger market share, but little competition. I mean, literally no competition kind of thing. And which means that you can push on your cost increases without bothering. I mean, every time you push your cost increases, generally what happens is you have a, contraction in terms of your sales kind of thing. That never happens with ITC. So I think ITC has a great business. I mean, again, the problem has been where do you deploy the capital? I mean, for example, FMCG, other than Patanjali, which came in, I think, I mean, literally I don't remember now anyone talking about Patanjali today. But other than Patanjali, I don't remember a brand that has suddenly come out of the blue, because it's a very, again, high capex industry, because you have to set up the distribution, which is a very different distribution from the cigarette industry. I mean, where cigarette is sold, much of the ITC products are not sold. I mean, you are not selling atta to a small Kakangri kind of thing. I mean, Kaka store kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whether that was the way to go, whether they should have just stuck to cigarettes. And I mean, if you take a VST Industries has done far better in terms of stock price performance compared to ITC in a long term. So, I mean, but VST has stuck to what they knew. I mean, they have basically not gone outside their domain expertise kind of thing.
I think if you remember, they had started ITC Classic FMCG business. Sorry, the NBFC business, which is ITC Classic. They started a couple of other businesses, which then again they had to shut down. I think FMCG, hotels, paper is decent, I would say, but majority of the where the capex is going.
I mean, ITC, but that's No, I think that's the problem kind of thing, because we are looking at in terms of, in terms of the, return on equity from those industries where they are, a Hindustan Lever or a Britannia, they are 100 years old. They have been, build their brand. The brand building itself, Ashirwad, to even get to people to know about Ashirwad. You can only compete on either price or a brand. If you have a brand, you have the ability to price yourself. If you don't have a brand, you are more or less like a private brand, in my opinion. So I think, whether ITC is, I think right now what they have actually, again, I think the problem comes for ITC because it's a professional company rather than a promoter-driven company. A promoter-driven company would have maybe made some certain decision. Right now, for example, they are not going into a buyback just because that will raise up the stake of BAT if they don't participate.
Yeah, correct.
The whole idea of trying to not give the cash back to your shareholders via buyback and construct. If you reduce the capital, the rest of the capital, the rest of the share stock price has to go up. But they are not doing that because they don't want to, have the BAT having much higher stake than what it is already there kind of thing. They don't want them to let in that. That I think is creating issues kind of thing, because that is forcing them to take decisions that are not in the best interest of the other shareholders. I mean, the minority shareholders. Even today, when they talk about giving out 85% of the dividend, then the question is that was, I mean, that's one of the worst ways to give out money back to shareholders, because it's a, I mean, now you are, I mean, every shareholder is taxed at 30% approximately.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are in 30% tax bracket, you are basically giving, I mean, whatever is earned, again, you are double taxation instead of trying to deploy it better kind of thing. I mean, Warren Buffett is buying back his shares because even though it's not exactly at fair value, he still feels that it's much more better deployment of his own capital. ITC can do that, but again, I think the problem is that because the professional management doesn't want anyone. I mean, it's nice. It's a nice club. I think now they are. I mean, they have been in this.
Yeah.
Years kind of. They are now. Why do you want to let a BAT come in and start dictating terms to you, kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. Once, I mean, again, the government doesn't want a foreign multinational to be the, what do you say? I mean, unlike elsewhere, we actually sort of Maruti to Suzuki. We invite foreign participation everywhere other than cigarettes. I mean, even for example, liquor. Now everything is held by MNCs. Basically,
Yeah. So I don't see the reason why you should be keeping a tobacco company, or what is the sacrosanct about holding that company, and what national interest does it serve?
I think once that change happens, I mean, then you see from being a value stock to a real growth stock. I mean, I think still has a potential kind of thing. For the potential to actually develop, I think the management has to change. I mean, the management is there for too long, and they don't have any. I mean, not much skin in the game kind of thing. And it's nice. I mean, cozy club, good salaries.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you want? I mean, don't rock the boat in a way, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But one interesting part out here is that so many funds, especially I'm not naming the funds out here, but so many funds seem to be very bullish on it. That is one part. And secondly, you see that the foreign investor, the FPI guys are moving out. The domestic funds, especially the PMS guys and some mutual funds, are like heavily betting on it. And along with it, you see a lot of retail investors, jumping into this stock. I mean, the computer dealer that I normally talk to, he was telling me that one of his relative told him to start an SIP in ITC around 8 months ago. So, there is this retail guys getting in, the domestic funds guys getting in, and FPI is moving out here. So, I think, and even if you look at Twitter, I think it is the most discussed stock. So you're people just following that stock, your handles dedicated to ITC. So, this is one stock, especially amongst the Nifty 50, where you are seeing that the retail share is actually increasing, while in the rest of the stocks, the retail share is not increasing. How do you guys, both of you, decipher? I mean, this is like slightly a behavioral finance kind of a problem out here. How do you guys look at it from that angle, the way investors are showing interest in this stock?
So I would say that, a lot of, like you rightly said, it's, people are selling it more on the dividend yield kind of, background. And so people are saying, okay, even if it doesn't go anywhere, I'm still getting, a decent dividend, 5-6%, 10% dividend yield, approximately that much. And some HNIs who I know, and they are. So what they are. So what certain HNI investors are doing is they are looking at they're doing covered calls. So they're selling options, call options, and trying to bring their average cost down. There is a large fund house who, again, I will not name, has it's number 2 on their holding list. That that they are holding ITC, and it's their top Indian bet. So that again, that fund manager, that fund also has a lot of followers, and a lot of people believe in that fund. And rightly so, they have delivered on performance also. So, there is, there, like you said, there are these Twitter influencers and celebrities who are bullish on the stock. So, a lot of retail people are getting into that, thinking of it as a safe stock, throwing up cash. classical value investing, the value stock or a value trap. I don't know, but
Prashant, what do you feel so many such heavy interest, retail interest in a large cap stock? I mean, retail interest was always there in mid cap and small cap, but ITC is completely the interest levels are very different.
Again, I mean, if you look at generally where people get into, I mean, in terms of herd philosophy, if you go into herd kind of thing, they get into two kinds of stocks, in my opinion. One beaten down stock. I mean, literally every beaten down stock, people, retail are the guys who are actually getting in kind of thing. The thing about this is, as Praveen, I mean, Anish said, this has a great story, I mean, narrative behind it. I mean, you have, several, high-profile funds picking up, which, I mean, and there's a kind of, coat-tailing kind of thing saying that, boss, I mean, they have the ability to understand this. And, I mean, I don't know how people are looking at as if, I mean, whether that trigger will come 1 year down the lane or 3 years down the lane. I think that trigger will come. The question is, how long one should wait? I mean, how long will that trigger, I mean, for example, ITC had been going up from, say, 2008 to 2012. It had gone up quite significantly kind of thing. I mean, 2018 kind of thing. I mean, it's not a bad, I mean, the problem is that right now it's around 40% drawdown from the peak. But per se, it hasn't been a very bad stock for a very long time kind of thing. So I think most people are looking at it as an opportunity to catch something that has a, what would we call as a margin of safety kind of thing. Well, what is the downside? I mean, what's the worst case downside? You may not make money. I mean, that's, I think, the worst case downside you should be looking at. I mean, last 10 years, you wouldn't have made money. I mean, you wouldn't have made, I mean, the last 10 years, I think, is 4% or 4.5% CAGR kind of thing. Worst case basis. Let's assume 0% for next 10 years. That's the worst case basis. What do you say? I mean, I mean, what do you say? Personally, I'm biased because I'm bullish on it kind of thing. I have a position in my family account. But basically, I think it's not a very bad stock per se to get into compared to a lot of other stocks. It's a cheap stock. So you have a, what do you say, way of understanding, okay, I mean, the business is not going down anywhere, not going out kind of thing. And even if you look at international examples like Atlia, which is one of the, I mean, it has delivered better than Warren Buffett kind of thing in a way. I mean, Berkshire has been a long term. So it has been one of the best performers in the US market. I mean, again, cigarette industry kind of thing. But again, their buybacks have actually added value kind of thing. Right now, the problem with ITC is that we don't see a trigger. We don't see a trigger that can match our narrative of why it should be bought. Right now, there's no trigger, but I think that trigger will come. I mean, it's just a matter of time when that trigger will come, when you suddenly realize that it was out there in plain sight all the time, just that we didn't notice that at that juncture kind of thing.
But you will continue momentum, no, that time. So you're okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, momentum is a very different play, right? I mean, as a momentum player, I wouldn't touch ITC kind of thing. Not just now, not even.
No, I'm saying when the trigger comes, you'll buy it 5-10% higher. And it will...
No, I think we'll buy mostly at twice the price. I mean, you take Tata Steel. I mean, I haven't bought Tata Steel, but Tata Steel started figuring in momentum portfolios way after it has gone up from the lows.
Yes,
I mean, the idea is that the value became momentum kind of thing only at the later. I mean, you have done a lot of analysis, so you know that value doesn't become momentum immediately.
Yeah, so we got Tata Steel at around, I think, 800 or something, 850 or something like that. So long after it gone up.
Long after it had gone up kind of thing. So I mean, again, there's a question of opportunity cost, whether you should be in ITC waiting for that trigger to happen, which may or may not happen. I mean, we don't know whether it will happen anyway kind of thing. So I think, I mean, overall, I don't think the retail is, I mean, compared to a lot of other stocks where they are retail and getting big time and getting burned kind of thing. I don't think the burning here would be in terms of capital, I mean, permanent loss. It will be more in terms of opportunity cost. It will be more in terms of, what do you say? I mean, how long you can, be patient enough and wait for the turnaround to come in. It's not just ITC. You take McDowell. It has not gone anywhere for a last, 6-7 years. I mean, I think after the takeover by Diageo, it has, I mean, there's one trigger. Diageo took over. They were supposed to be cleaning up the balance sheets. And then now a MNC liquor company kind of thing. But then nothing has happened for the stock. I mean, for the stockholders, it has been a zero, return, even though the market has gone all over the place kind of thing. I think, again, I mean, Diageo is much more expensive. In that sense, you look at McDowell, it's way expensive today. Even today, despite not going anywhere for the last 5 to 7 years kind of thing.
Yeah. So, so when we were working on this story, it was we keep doing this. Quickly, there is one quick thing, about ITC is the ESG factor, and ESG is a very big thing. Is there something that you want to add before we kind of move to some other topics that we want to discuss?
So, ESG, honestly, I don't. I think it is an issue for institutional investors. It is something that people are talking about now. I think the new millennial crowds, or climate change and all of that is or environmental issues or social issues. There, I mean, it is a factor. Let's admit it. Whether it's a fad, whether it's not, it is influencing buying behavior of funds. So that. And we've seen that recently I'll try and put it in the notes. There was this paper that came out on does sin stocks, does it make sense to exclude sin stocks or whether to hold sin stocks, and do they give a higher return or because there was an interesting argument saying that as an investment manager, are you required to take those into account, and if a lot of people start buying these ESG stocks, and if the valuation of that goes up, then are you doing your investor a disservice by bidding up the price of those ESG labeled stocks, and is there a value opportunity in the non-ESG compliant kind of stocks? Like Berkshire Hathaway gets a very low rating on ESG because they own Burlington and a lot of energy companies there. Whereas somebody like Tesla gets a high rating, even though they have a lot of Bitcoin now, all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know whether it really makes sense.
Okay, so
Prashant, any view on ESG?
No, I mean, I look. I mean, of the ESG, social is very difficult to actually. I mean, environment and governance. That is designed by law. I mean, basically, we have laws to ensure that companies don't go way out of line kind of thing. So those actually are covered. I mean, you can't actually destroy your government. Again, is power a negative? I mean, is solar a positive? Again, you have to go back to how silicon is mined. I mean, if you really look at how silicon is mined, how silicon is treated, then the question is whether it's really environmentally as good as, hydro, for example. Or in hydro, the amount of forest cover that is lost. I mean, there's no real line that you can draw. I mean, it's all lines in sand. I mean, again, it's a nice narrative to spin around saying that, boss, we are all looking at environmental factors. I mean, is Coca-Cola, which uses a lot of water, for example. I mean, any company that uses a lot of water, is there environmental friendly? Because you are using a resource that is a natural resource that is not exactly, fungible. I mean, it's not, you can't take it out for forever without replenishing it kind of thing. So I think, ESG as a factor, it's like people want something to say, but I'm doing something for the better of the community. I mean, there's this whole idea that thought process that people want. It's like what do you say? Doing someone recently said, I have donated X percent, X for this new, venture kind of thing. It's a NGO kind of thing. But that X was 0.02% of his net worth. But it made it, it's like making a statement kind of thing saying that I'm doing something. By not buying. That doesn't actually, unless you can influence the management. Now, you not buying or not, I don't think will change the management. ITC can't, if ITC is a sin stock because it's a cigarette company. That's their business. You can't, the only way will be to close down the business. But that doesn't mean people will stop smoking cigarettes. Right? It will not be ITC, it will be something else. People will shift. It's not like your cost will be someone else's thing kind of thing. So I don't think ESG at best, it's like a good a spin narrative to explain underperformance, saying that, boss, we are not, we are underperforming because we are looking at very good companies with our ESG ratings. So, that's a trade-off you have to accept kind of thing. But it is a stupid way of doing things, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, we have other topics to discuss. So, one important topic, I think, let us jump into this. Everyone has talked about this skin in the game thing, that should mutual fund fund managers be putting their own money into their own schemes that they manage. And, I think everybody has had an opinion on this. So, I mean, like, we are not here to basically have hard opinions, but it's just something that since it's there on everybody's mind, I thought we should just spare some time on this particular topic where, Nassim Taleb has written a book called Skin in the Game, and it's something that funds have been doing on their own, investing money in their own funds, which has been more or less voluntarily. Now SEBI has made it why voluntary? Everybody should invest. So there are a lot of technical issues out there. We don't know whether it will actually happen. But do you guys have something to share on this particular topic? Prashant, would you like to say something out here?
No, look, I think it's a fair game kind of thing. Look, end of the day, you are, when you are selling something, you have a fiduciary duty for your investors. You have to look above and beyond what you want to gain. You are looking, basically, you have to construct it as a first. This is something I strongly believe in benefit, that the customer will benefit. And if you can't take your own, money on, put on that, then what's the point? It's not like, okay, this is not suitable for me, but I think I can. It's nice to sell something kind of thing. It's like me, a vegetarian, trying to sell you a burger, basically a chicken kind of thing, saying that this is very good for your health. But sorry, sir, I can't eat myself because I'm a vegetarian. I think that's, hypocrisy at a worst kind of thing. I think, look, end of the day, 20%, is it too big, too small? It's a percentage. That can always be redesigned kind of thing. But the question is more of the intent kind of thing. The question was, if you are managing money on a certain fund, you should have, you should have 100% of your funds there, because you have the whole belief that this is what I really believe in, and this is what I'm trying to sell to my clients, and this is what is earning my bread and butter. So if I am not investing even a small percentage, forceful, the question was more of, should it be forced or should it be voluntary? Because voluntary is much better than force. Problem is that, unless the law, till SEBI clamped down on commissions, mutual funds were happy to give, over and above commissions kind of thing. Then the SEBI clamped down, they all came in line kind of thing. Then SEBI said, every act hasn't been come at the, mutual funds coming on their own. SEBI said, boss, you can only have one large cap fund or one mid cap fund. Then everyone decided, okay, we'll have, that was, there's no, right or wrong kind of thing. It was something like common sense kind of thing. That there's no point in having 5 large cap funds within your own fund also. But no one did anything till the time SEBI came in and cracked the grip kind of thing. So I think in that way, SEBI, I think the talks would have gone up for quite some time. But the problem I think SEBI saw was that there was no push from the mutual fund saying that we'll do this. We'll figure, put it in place in a way that our fund managers, our guys who are taking the decision, have some skin in the game. So there's this, I don't know Hindi much kind of thing. There's this, first, carrot, try to give it a carrot, but then if you don't give it a carrot, give it a stick kind of thing. So they'll try to, I think SEBI tries the carrot way kind of thing, smooth way. They don't want to go out and mess up with the biggest of the guys kind of thing. But when that doesn't happen, then you crack the whip and say, boss, this is this, and take it or leave it kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I broadly agree with what Prashant says. And, for the fund managers, it's a no-brainer that, whether investing in the stock, and arguments like, oh, my asset allocation is different from my investor's asset allocation, and 20% of your money you cannot put in a fund that you're running is
incremental money, Anish.
Incremental money. So yeah, so that and the kind of responses it evoked itself tells you that this has triggered a lot of people. For the CEOs or for the HR head or the marketing head, I can understand that it's not practical to invest in 50 funds of the same mutual fund. But why do you have 50 funds in the first place? I want to ask. But yeah, figure out. That's a structural issue. That's we are great at structures. We can figure out a structure like a ESOP pool or whatever we have. We can figure out a mutual fund pool for the which can be managed, in which the CXOs invest a certain 20% of their salary. For the junior guys, research analysts, dealers, and things like that, yeah, obviously, okay, have a salary cutoff beyond which they invest.
But Anish, the issue is that, some people say that that does this mean that when you're building a guy is building a real estate kind of a firm, then should he be investing in that particular property every time he's selling it to his clients or customers? So how do you address that? It's like, why on?
You're saying a private equity fund?
Not a private equity. Suppose if I'm a developer, I'm a real estate developer, and I'm building a tower, okay, and then should the real estate developer also be a part buying the flats along with the investors?
No,
So
you
that is the
already have
question that
skin in
people
the
ask.
game because you are putting equity. You will, if you are developing the building, you are putting equity to you'll be taking leverage from the bank. You'll be putting equity. You'll raise it from some investor, or you will put in some amount of yours. You are running around doing all the work and getting that. So their skin in the game, financial skin in the game, is already there. Whether he will live there or not live there comes later, because he may be building 10 buildings. Now he cannot go and live in 10. But does he have financial skin in the game? Yeah, he has financial skin in the game. Every developer has that.
I mean, huge financial skin in the game. I mean, point is that, I mean, this is not even a right comparison, but if, end of the day, if you are, I mean, a developer can go bankrupt kind of thing, because if he is unable to sell, basically, I mean, no fund manager will go bankrupt because he couldn't get clients kind of thing. At worst case basis, I don't make money. That's something. So, I mean,
like say a hospital. Now will Dr. Reddy get treated in Apollo Hospital? I'm sure he will. Will Dr. Lal get tested in his Lal Path Lab? I'm sure he will. Will Dr. Durusha or Amir Shah, will they get tested in Metropolis? Yes, they will. 100%. They have no problem with their using their own products for their health or their safety. Or will TRL owners eat? If they are making that tablet of medicine which their company makes and it's needed for their treatment required, they will use it. No? So if you are doing this, I mean, some of the responses were from very from highly evolved CEOs was really funny, saying that, oh, if Jockey, will you accept 20% of if you're the CEO of Jockey, will you take 20% of your salary in Jockey products? Or if you're a CEO of a biscuit company, will you take 20% of your salary in biscuit products? And those kind of comparisons, does not behoove these people, that, the kind of people that they are. But that it has triggered them. I think it came as a shock surprise to them. Usually SEBI is sort of, yeah, okay.
So we're talking about skin in the game, and you wanted to conclude that part.
Yeah, so I was just saying that, usually SEBI comes out with these consultation papers, and then you have a working group, and then they give their recommendations, and that's the process they usually follow in when they come out with such regulations. I think this time something needed to be seen to be done in light of what happened with Franklin, and what came out with the fact that I know Prashant will disagree. We had a conversation on this. I mean, but the fact that that the senior management had investments in some of those funds which they took out earlier, and so with those issues, I think it was more a reaction to something of that sort. And this, I don't think passive things. Passive said that it'll get rolled back in a week or so. I don't think so. Maybe there'll be some modification in terms of streamlining some of the provisions that need to be done. But I doubt that it will get rolled back and it will get implemented in some form or the other, which I think is very much needed.
Yeah. So quickly moving on to the next topic about Groww buying into the Indiabulls AMC. I mean, it is an interesting development for the simple reason that that here is a new fintech company that has bought into mutual fund, which doesn't have much of an assets as such, something like around 600 crore, but they did pay 26% for the AUM. And one way to look at it is like it is a very high price, but then the other way to look at it is like, they are getting a mutual fund that is like almost fully set. How do you guys look at this fintech companies buying into mutual funds? Because I want to look at slightly a bigger question than just one particular Groww. Of course, you guys can talk about Groww, or for that matter, other AMCs that has been bought over recently by fintech companies. So you guys, Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think it's 26%. I mean, basically, they are what I mean, if you there is cash in hand kind of thing. If you look at the India
Okay.
Bulls, there's 100. I mean, because you have to have around 120 crores network kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there is cash in hand. After that, it's around I think 12% or something. I think. I mean,
Okay.
but percent if you look at what how Fidelity paid or got paid kind of thing when they exited. I mean, Fidelity acquisition by L&T kind of thing. But the point for me is that look, end of the day, how long it will take for you to set up your own, start from scratch. Assume Grow put up the application today. I think it will take at least 2 years, 1 year, 1.5, 2 years just to get your application resolved. Then you have put up your distributorship. I mean, it's a long process. By the time you really getting to a group, you are saying spending around 3-4 years kind of thing. And why spend that amount of time if you have enough capital? I mean, look, Grow has enough capital in terms of, I mean, ability to attract capital from its investors kind of thing. So for them, capital is not the constraint. So when you don't have that constraint, so I think, what do you say? I think Praveen is there.
Yeah, he's there.
I'm there. I'm listening to you, Prashant.
Manish?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. We are there. Okay. Now you go on, Prashant. Prashant, we are listening to you.
I think.
Yeah, sorry, I think I got cut off kind of thing. Anyway, so I think, I mean, overall, I think it's a interesting move by Grow. I mean, basically a Grow kind of thing because they have controlled the time. I mean, Zerodha has not yet got, I mean, the approval kind of thing. It's, I think, 1 year down the lane kind of thing since they have put in application. The NJ got that recently after being more than a year and a half kind of thing. At least NJ has a distributor already kind of thing. I mean, they have a base of distributors they can get on,
Yes.
quickly latch on to kind of thing. I mean, new companies, it will take, I mean, a Paytm. I mean, these are all B2C. I mean, if you look at these are all B2C kind of thing. I mean, Zerodha or a Paytm are mostly business to consumer kind of thing, not a business to business. I mean, distributors are business to business, B2B kind of relationship, wherein you are saying, boss, this is my product, please go ahead and sell it kind of thing to your customers. And I think for Grow, I think it's been I mean, I think it's a good move kind of thing. I think it's good that more, what do you say? I mean, Capital Mind is coming up. I mean, Zerodha, Paytm. I mean, a lot of guys I think will come up to AMCs because now that's the. I wrote a small note on it kind of thing because I think this is again more of an exclusive club. I mean, you're talking about a very exclusive club and you want to gain an entry. I mean, because that's the final peak. I mean, you either can be NBFC, but NBFC has the dime a dozen kind of thing. But a mutual fund, on the other hand, is much more smaller. I mean, again, it's not about whether you will make pay out of it. The question is, it will give you a brand that you can utilize elsewhere as well. I mean, you can build a brand in a mutual fund and then use it as a arm fund or NBFC. I mean, finally, if you look at all the fintech from majority of fintech, finally have to go. I mean, if you really want to make money, everyone is burning money right now. But if you really want to make money, the only money that can be made is by lending kind of. So they will finally everyone will figure out, boss, that's the only way. But to get there, to have people to trust you kind of thing, that requires something else. And why not? And I think, I mean, most of them, I don't think will go ahead with active funds in a way because they are having the new kind of new generation customers who are more interested in passive, interested in index kind of products kind of thing. So it's much more easier to, I mean, no explanations to be given, no star managers to be hired. So your running cost will be much more smaller kind of thing. You just have a good guy, set of guys, and then you take it from there.
Anish?
Yeah. So I think, similar thoughts. So I think ultimately everybody, if you see the the US, which is ahead of us, so if you've seen Betterment or some of those guys, everybody has either pivoted to become a they're either becoming a bank or they're pivoting to become asset manager. That ultimately what is, I mean, fintech is not a new industry by itself. Ultimately, you are either you will pivot to asset management, you will pivot to banking, you will pivot to payment, you will pivot to something of the there's no separate business model as such, called robo advisory. There's a term robo advisory, but it doesn't happen that much. If you see now, Vanguard and Charles Schwab have just entered that market. They got into a hybrid kind of model, and they've just taken it over, completely. There's no money to be made there. The money is ultimately going to be made in selling the products downstream. Now, whether Grow will make money selling the products, as Prashant said, whether they will go into lending or they'll use this brand to get into adjacent products or not, that is to be seen. Where how they expand their business model from here on. But passive, again, we've discussed this, whether passive products they'll really be able to make money on that, because building a brand, getting customer trust. We've seen Benchmark in the past. They were the pioneers. They had good products, but sustaining that. So that's where I think yeah, and even Sanjeev thinks that somebody like Zerodha will have a good chance that they have another business which can subsidize or have enough cash flows to sustain the business model of a passive led AMC. And some of the newer ones you will have to burn cash if you want to get there, because ultimately you will make 10 basis point, 20 basis point. Beyond that, how is your passive fund different from somebody else's passive fund in terms of tracking error and cost beyond the point?
Yeah, Anish, that is a topic we will discuss. It's a lengthy topic
Yeah.
about.
So
today is not the day.
So beyond that, I don't know. It's a good club. But again, it's a 80-20 business. 20% of the guys have 80% of the assets. You will have to figure out a way how, if you want to grow assets or whether you want to use it for something else or something. So yeah, so it's interesting. But yeah, at least now they have a business model to
Yeah.
I mean, selling direct funds would never make money kind of thing for you anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, you are actually losing money. Paytm tried to, recently got a clarification saying that whether they can charge at least the cost that is directly attributable to the direct client. And the SEBI said no charges, you can't charge anything kind of thing. So I think everyone who is, the fintech guys on the selling the direct mutual funds, I think they're all losing money out there kind of thing. The question is what will subsidize them for at least balancing the equation, if not growing the equation kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think some of the fintech, I think Kuvera, it was somebody else. They tried getting some clarification from SEBI on this, whether they could be reimbursed for some expenses and things like that. But SEBI said no, you cannot take any money if you're selling direct funds. You have to take money from there. So there is no business model as such in that robo advisory. If you want to call it that. Then also just a larger question, what are VCs funding really at the end of the day? If at the end of the day you wanted to fund a mutual fund, you didn't have to, put so much money and dilute yourself into grow and purchase a mutual fund. So that's another, like a larger question again, that, what are VCs really funding? So, yeah, that's.
Okay, there is one or two questions out here. Firstly, this is a very fundamental thing that we have been talking about, is the success of the small cap rally. I mean, you have seen funds giving 200% returns out there. You think we are in the last leg of the small cap rally?
You're all system guys, boss. We don't know. So you're asking the wrong people the wrong question. We'll just follow the trend as long as it continues. We have our exits to get out. If there is nothing to be had, we'll go to cash. If something is moving, we'll get in there. Maybe a little late, but we'll get in there and try and get the meat of the rally. But yeah, so small caps, if you see 2018-19 have underperformed, and until last year underperformed. And just the academic view there is that value, and people have done this study, that value performs in small caps. That value factor can be captured more in small caps than in large caps, because the large cap market also becomes far more efficient. So this small cap rally perhaps is actually a value rally, which you are seeing, that we've seen post on the day, the day the vaccine news came, that okay, this is approved for use, and Pfizer came out with 90% efficacy confirmed, and that November onwards, that rally which has started in the the so-called reopening stocks is actually a small cap value rally, which how long it goes on, it's on. It may go on for another, as long as the commodity super cycle continues, or where that cycle goes. But as of now, it's on specialty chemical, metals, all those kind of sectors continuing. So, Prashant.
I mean, basically, this has been one of the fastest rallies. If you have to look at it historically, 1 year return, if you look at, wherever you look at, this has been one of the fastest rallies kind of thing. But again, we have to look back in terms of, from 2018, I mean, it's been 3 years of zero returns kind of thing for a lot of these stocks. I mean, a lot of these stocks, I think, are just getting back to, I mean, if you take the all-time highs kind of thing, we are not exactly breaking all-time highs for a lot of small cap stocks even today kind of thing. So I think the small cap, I mean, basically it was a very, not just a time correction, but as a price correction as well. And I mean, personally, my opinion is that, I mean, what you talked about, for example, the size factor, I mean, that's always in play. I think the size factor, I mean, in the long term, you ought to say small cap because of, I mean, Cliff has come out with a research kind of thing saying that basically you are taking higher risk. So for that higher risk, you are getting paid better kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in the long term, small caps will generally be able to beat a large cap. I mean, because of the higher beta kind of thing. But at the same time, I don't think, I mean, I think, still think it's much more of a wave one of a, if you will take go to the Elliott wave kind of theory on a broader trend, I think still wave one, which is a very sharp, I mean, because it was unexpected rally kind of thing. No one expected, I mean, small caps were supposed to be the hardest hit. I mean, if you think about it, they, I mean, compared to large caps, they don't have the amount of what you say, I mean, not flush with funds. They have a lot of efficiencies, I mean, which is why they are all small caps kind of thing. So they were supposed to be hit very badly. And some of them actually have come out with pretty decent results, in my opinion. And overall, I think we are still at a disbelief phase that why is this, I mean, so much of a rally happening in the first place.
Yeah.
So disbelief doesn't come at a loss. I mean, lost leg is when everyone has the belief. Right now, I think it's a, I mean, in if you remember back to 2003 when the market took off suddenly, Nifty doubled basically in a matter of 1 year kind of thing. There's a lot of disbelief because we have been seeing, I mean, literally market being nowhere from after the 2000 crash till 2003 August, it went nowhere kind of thing. So there's, I mean, the economy was not going anywhere kind of thing. It was not like anything was great was happening, and suddenly market took off. The market fell back only because NDA, which was supposed to get back to power, lost the power. But I think we are still at a stage one of a multi-year bull market kind of thing, not a stage 5 of a end of a bull market kind of thing. I mean, there's no reason for me. I mean, your growth is not at a multi-year highs, which was as if in 2008, for example, when I mean, stocks are growing very strongly, and you are also having very high valuation. Right now, I mean, the conjunction is more of stocks maybe looks expensive, but that's more of optical in nature, in my opinion, rather than actually. I mean, if you're looking at 3-5 years down the lane, kind of.
You're a data guy. You come out with a lot of these data that and some analysis, something. So is any of that some? I think you look at a lot of these things, the number of stocks above 200 DMA or the distance from certain DMA. So do you see any kind of short-term exhaustion there in the rally, or you think something of that sort? Is that an extreme sentiment?
No, I mean, I assume there will be a short-term exhaustion sometime back kind of thing. I actually posted kind of thing saying that whenever number of stocks, percentage of stocks that had 90% plus, so when you cross the, I mean, when 90% of the market is already about 200 day, I mean, it's a rubber band effect kind of thing. But actually, it has happened in Nifty. I mean, since when I posted, Nifty has gone nowhere kind of thing. But it has not actually happened across stocks kind of thing. I mean, small caps are still continuing to rally. I mean, if you look at momentum, because we are all mostly in small cap and mid cap kind of thing, we are seeing excess returns kind of thing. But I think that will happen. I mean, basically, market has to flatten out kind of thing. Wherein you are, I mean, the catch up has to. I mean, this is actually one of the rare phases what I've seen historically from whatever data I have of market being able to sustain at this. I mean, basically, number of stocks above 90%, above 200 day, above 90. I mean, they were one-off kind of thing earlier. I mean, they went off in maybe a month, 2 months kind of thing. Now we are having multiple months where they are sitting tight, which means that I mean, the breadth is awesomely good. I mean, the breadth is awesomely good. I don't think there's, I mean, the negativity is not dead. I mean, I can't see a reason why. I mean, historically as well, whenever there has been awesome breadth, that hasn't translated into very bad. I mean, when 2000, even when March happened, for example, last March happened, out of the blue, supposedly kind of thing. Actually, I mean, the percentage of stocks that were above 200 was around 40%. Now we are 90%. I mean, look, I mean, I think if you look at historically, market would have already showed a signal that a lot of things are going bad, or just a few segments are holding up the market kind of. That is not happening. Right now, the whole market is holding up the market kind of thing. In a way, I mean, even though the Nifty is not reflecting it, the breadth, I mean, I don't think the breadth comes by because of retail buying. I mean, retail is very small part of the niche. I mean, if you take the, I mean, how much of investments we have. this is sophisticated professional buyers kind of thing who are there, who are buying into in stocks that they have. They are looking at 3 to 5 years in the horizon, not exactly the next 1 year, which may or may not be the best year kind of thing, because we have had a great year. But I think we are still at a early phase kind of thing, because the breadth is awesome here. I mean, there's no reason from, if you're looking at the breadth, to say, I mean, no divergences. I mean, it's literally smooth sailing all the way kind of thing.
But a small 10, 15, 20% correction, you just, I mean, that is part for the course.
Yeah, that's part for the course. I think 10% you should expect kind of thing. But again, the 10% is, I mean, Nifty actually has, went down 10% recently kind of thing. But no one even bothered. I mean, that's becoming like a non-issue kind of thing. Because again, the guys who are bearish are focusing on a 30% drop. That I don't think is happening. I mean, lightning doesn't strike twice.
Or if you're really looking at Bitcoin, so if something goes up 30% down also overnight, we are okay. We are like, Bitcoin is 30% down. So Praveen, I want to ask you, you talk to a lot of fund managers across the board, and you talk to them. So what is the feeling there? What are they thinking about this rally? First in the Nifty, now in the small caps, mid caps kind of space, which a lot of people are, this thing like Prashant said, there's so much disconnect source per se. Last March was like, people were like, oh, the world is not going to come to an end. Why are we falling so much? And this March is like, the whole world is coming to an end. Why are we up so much? So, and people are trying to make sense of that.
So I think to become a fund manager, one important thing that you should have is you should be a born super optimistic, not just optimistic. So because most of our fund managers are long only guys, okay.
Yeah.
So we have very few of them who are not that optimistic, and when you always say, you go and talk to them in any market, and they will want to say hey, this is a great market to buy. If it's down, they say it's a great market to buy. If it's up, it's a great market to buy. So there are very few who will say that there would be let us be a little bit cautious right now. So right now in the small cap rally, one fund manager said that let's be cautious, and then his fund house got back to him and said why are you making such kind of statements to the media? Okay. So even if you are a little bit pessimistic or something like that, then you still can't make those statements in front of media. Now look at it this way, that the quarterly results for the small cap guys, for most of these guys, okay, the results that are there for only till December. For many small cap companies, the March results are also not out. Okay. So what are these projections based on? So you don't really know that what has been the fundamental growth. So that is one thing that, at least that particular quarter, obviously you guys understand stuff, you guys can make a fairly good guess about it. So they are looking at, in my view, I think we still do not have very good quality information about small companies as compared to large companies. Okay, that is one part. Secondly, is that you look at the stocks that are going up, that really do not have a direct relationship with consumption in the Indian market. When I say that, what I'm trying to say is, what I mean is that if you look at the FMCG stocks, the large cap, they have not done well for the last say 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But most of the B2B small caps have done really well, and this has a lot to do with metals and mining and software. Now, when you look at metals and mining, you know that copper has done really well, and you will know that basically when the US dollar, okay, is doing well, okay, then basically typically you see that the copper prices seem to go up, because the emerging market currency has fallen, and that's why the metal prices look very high. Yeah. And on the other hand, when the US dollar is doing well, it really does well for Indian software companies. So if you actually draw down the list of these companies, you will see that these are B2B companies, mainly also probably associated with a strong dollar and so many other things. So when people say that, bhai, idhar to economy ka lag gaya hai, Indians are not right now because of COVID and all, we are not doing so well. But if you look at the stocks that are doing well, that in most cases have nothing to do fundamentally with with someone buying atta or noodles, or for that matter soaps. Okay, so I'm typically talking about FMCG. So even in terms of also auto and all, Tata has done well more because of the Chinese growth. actually.
And rest of the
for
world,
JLR.
US is now almost vaccinated. They are almost
Yes,
back to
China
business.
actually.
China, I believe, is
It's crazy. The in June itself, the copper prices, the Chinese consumption had really gone up. Last year, June, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And from there onwards, they had taken complete control of the COVID situation. So if you talk to the fund managers out here, they, as it is, they are very optimistic guys. Okay. And right now, they are looking only at that part of the market that is performing. And I think that is fair enough, because they don't need to look at whatever, whatever 800 stocks that matter, and or the say 50 or 70 small cap that matter. Okay, they will only be looking at that part of the market that is performing well. And Prashant, like she said, that this is a very strong market, and all the stocks that matter right now are I mean, that I guess, like, what he's trying to tell us is that the technicals are also supporting. So maybe, when people say that Indian economy, when you look at on the ground, is not looking that great, but the market is not looking at that part of the economy at all. So we are looking at a completely different market that will sail through. And maybe once things improve, we will see all these other, even these FMCG kind of companies following. And that is the general feeling amongst fund managers as well. Prashant, you or Anish, you would like to add something out here?
No, I think we fairly covered this all, and I think Prashant also added the technical aspect or I mean, you can get it, like he said, you can get a 10-15% correction at any point in time. That's not, not unexpected. When we'll get it is when people will feel most extremely left out, or that's when when everybody jumps in, then that's the time you will actually see something give up, like you're seeing in the Nifty now. Like 6 months Nifty is just in that 1,000-1,500 point range, so maybe you'll see that. And he, he also covered in a recent blog post where he launched his quality portfolio, that every style has its season, every style has its cycle. So it's not that the compounding stocks or the so-called quality stocks are not going to perform well in the future, or that momentum will always perform well all the time. It's not like that. You need to have value and momentum again are negatively correlated, what a lot of AQR papers show and the data shows. So you will see these cycles come in. Styles will go in and out of. But since it's an index head podcast, we have to say that index, and we have to say something about the index investing. That index will have all these styles. It is a
yes. That is there's a topic that we need to handle maybe next time, and that is to do with with this whole idea that do index funds actually underperform the index. Okay, we will come back. We'll discuss this topic later on. I think maybe we should end this podcast on that particularly curious note, I would say.